Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. Sentinels have to be on high alert for the Masters Toronto tournament after Wolves have been cooking in scrims over the last few days, and they're now doing it to the top Chinese team as well. Yes, they've made some changes in recent times, but big updates potentially on the power rankings these teams are looking for going into the big tournament in Toronto starting in a week's time. Drama as well on the replay system, finally arriving into VALORANT after 5 years. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new. Thought this is pretty cool to look back on as well. These, of course, were the agents at launch when VALORANT first came out in 2020. This is where we are today. Now, look, is that a surprise? No. And in 5 years' time, it's going to look even more chaotic than this. But of course, the meta sometimes changes, sometimes doesn't change. Obviously, everyone has their favourite meta from VALORANT history, and there's always a debate on whether it's good at the moment or not. We know that Teho changes, of course, though, will be in action for the upcoming tournament, but VALORANT confirmed a lot yesterday. Starting here, Unreal Engine 5, we've talked about this a lot, that they're going to roll it out with this patch at the end of July, so, you know, it should improve performance, is the bottom line for the player base. Of course, we generally talk about what's relevant for competitive play, but it has been a major talking point of the pros and top ranked players being very frustrated with the state of ranked, and there's a few things that Riot can look to try and do to fix that. One issue on the smurfing side, it's not super relevant, of course, for, you know, the competitive players that are frustrated with the state of ranked and crypto throwing and all these other issues that are currently happening. But I think they might have tried this in Overwatch. The idea is to combat smurfing using an app or some sort of SMS verification so that if you've got another account, you can't just have multiple accounts on the same thing. That's the point anyway. So, you know, will it work? Is it a big needle mover? I guess we'll see on that one. There's also this pretty interesting. So if new maps are in the game, they will add an incentive such that in the first couple of weeks, if you lose, you don't lose as much. If you win, you still win all of your RR back. So, interesting idea that Riot are introducing, but as I say, they've done a lot over the last couple of days. There's also this, which is pretty interesting. So you can now look at your behaviour, and I think people are actually going to kind of like this, to see, you know, what they did. Did they leave the game? Did they do friendly fire or whatever, right? It keeps a record of everything that you did on the right-hand side and notes your at-risk behaviours for the quality of your matchmaking, right, and all this stuff. So if you've done anything what Riot would consider wrong, and of course, you know, that's a matter of debate sometimes, right, and you know how it is, I'm sure people are going to have their perspective on this, but if you're going to get banned or if there's some sort of issue that's going to happen, you're going to be able to see it coming, and you're going to be able to make sure that you're, you know, on your best behaviour, as it were, as Riot would like to see. Now, a couple of big updates on the competitive side. The partnerships agreements, right, they come to a conclusion at the end of 2026. We talked about yesterday whether that's going to be relevant for challengers as well. There's been some rumours about maybe challengers teams are going to be having the possibility to actually qualify for internationals. Maybe that's not possible right now, but it could be in 2027 if they renew the partnership agreements on... Look, I mean, Riot can effectively make the terms, right? Because these organisations are coming to VALORANT and they are getting paid by Riot. Like, that's the way the agreements work, is that Riot give them a stipend to compete rather than the other way around, where in other esports competitions you would pay in as a franchise fee, but that's not how Riot decide to run things, because, you know, this way they can maintain more control of the relationships, which, you know, maybe makes an awful lot of sense, and maybe in many respects could be better for the scene in general. Now, they will renew them, however. There will be some changes. The goal is to be more open, more flexible, and, you know, more ecosystem moments, which is, you know, for me, that's kind of the big one, really. Want to create more moments like Masters and Champions. More flexibility, want to design a system that gives a wider variety of competitions, formats, and event locations across the world. Partnership is a key component, but VCT will be more open, better bridging the gap between Tier 1 and Tier 2. So that is the big point, really, because, you know, from day one, people were calling this franchising of the VALORANT League. But it technically never was, but people were saying that for good reason, really, because we had, you know, 10 teams, and then, look, you can qualify through Ascension, that's great, but it's still not quite the same initially. I mean, even this is currently true for G2. G2 feel like a part of the league, but if they don't make it to Champions, which they will, but if they don't make it to Champions, they get relegated back to Challengers. That's still how the rules work. Now, in 2027, that's likely not going to be true. I would imagine that Riot will choose them as a partner team, or maybe they're going to change the structure entirely with actually who qualifies and who doesn't, and have a different system to get into the top tier. The other, though, big change that is officially going to launch, they've teased this for some time, but it's now finally going to be here, September. Patch 11.06, replay system is going to finally arrive. Now, this is look, maybe for most players it's probably not going to be massively relevant, but for fans of the game, for content creators, and for teams, they've wanted this for years. I mean, the fact that it hasn't been a thing is pretty outrageous. They spent a long time, I imagine, fixing the bugs, and look, this is what it's going to look like. This is some of the teasers. Okay, maybe it's still got some bugs. Every replay system is not going to be perfect. It is what it is, but it's still better that it exists than it doesn't. And certainly for the teams wanting to review VOD and stuff like this, the fact that it's taken 5 years, I think, is pretty outrageous. But, like, I suppose better late than never. It's going to be here in a couple of months' time anyway. And, you know, then, look, the fans will have something else to complain about, I suppose, and they'll move on to something else. But we want to talk about Masters Toronto. There's a big tournament upcoming in a week's time where everything gets underway, and wanted to look at some of the favourites for the tournament and how that presently looks. Of course, some teams got the bye. XLG, they got the bye to the second round of the bracket through to the playoff stage because they were the #1 seed in China. That's the big advantage that you get. But also, they've made a change. Yu has been benched off the roster due to... I don't really know why, they didn't really describe it, but they need to make a change in that department. I'm not exactly 100% sure what they're going to do in that position as of yet. But they got the Chinese teams to do power rankings of the rosters. Of course, XLG, they put themselves down at the bottom here for good juju, I suppose. But I do like how every team at Masters is going to be really good. Right, on some level they were really good. Best in the world. But... some teams will say, oh, they're all like A tier, they're all A tier, S tier, but these guys decided, you know what, we will be more harsh. So they put Wolves between the B and the C tier, they put BLG in the B tier, then they have Gen.G, PaperX, and Sentinels, all in this kind of category. So I think very interesting where they put Sentinels, first of all, just because G2, if you guys can see, are up here at the top, right? They've way beyond the S tier, you know, best team in the game as far as XLG are concerned. They've got G2 in the stratosphere. But Sentinels, who of course were second in the Americas, they're down between the A and B tier. You know, they're B+, they're A-. They're on the same level as Gen.G, PaperX, and maybe it's true, but I don't think there's that much of a difference. And I certainly don't think Liquid are above them. I mean, obviously, they have been forced to make the Nats change, and presumably these were done before the Nats change was official, that his visa is going to be a problem. And also, how are MIBR above Sen? I also don't really understand that one, given that Sentinels were the higher seed in the region. Whatever, it is what it is. RRQ up in the S tier. They really rate them. Fnatic in the S tier as well. Heretics just behind. So, you know, I thought it was an interesting list. We also got this one. So the BLG guys did it. I mean, it looked a little bit cleaner from them. They had Liquid in the C tier. Then they had MIBR, Gen.G, and of course Wolves in the B tier. They put themselves, actually no, they didn't vote on themselves. They could have done though, but they decided not to on this occasion. They put XLG in the A tier with PaperX, Heretics, and then Sentinels there as well. And then the favourites, again, RRQ getting a lot of gas alongside G2 and Fnatic. Look, RRQ have done incredibly well to make it. Jemkin and the boys have been cooking. How's that going to fare on the international stage? I think, you know, I'll believe it when I see it, I suppose. Certainly compared to the top teams on paper. But, you know, they did an amazing job. And G2, Fnatic, certainly understandable to be right up there. I guess, you know, you just give the #1 seat in the region their due, I suppose. This is what Wolves had to say. The jerseys are pretty fire, by the way. You guys can just about see that on the screen. They decided to stack everyone into S&A, apart from themselves. They put themselves down here because, again, they don't want to give themselves bad juju or whatever people say. But they had Gen.G, MIBR. I mean, like, everyone was kind of on the same ballpark here. These guys didn't rate RRQ as highly. They dropped them down, and they had, well, a ton of teams at the top. Even BLG and XLG they put in the A tier. But realistically, they're saying G2, Heretics, Fnatic, Sentinels, probably favourites for the tournament. And, you know, Liquid, again, they don't quite rate them quite as highly. So intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. But from the Wolves team, it is interesting to see where they might end up, because that is Sentinels' first round game. That's who they play first. Lev were playing G2 as well, and finally maybe getting some decent results on the boards. With Okonos, Sata, they've made the changes. Maybe finally starting to see something. They're up 8-6 here on G2. We had PaperX down 8-5 to EDG after some more EDG drama lately with exactly who they're going to get as their final player, because it seems like after Simon's gone, GNE might be gone as well, and they're getting somebody else in. But this was the notable result, really, which is Wolves up 14-5 on XLG. Now, maybe XLG aren't quite what they used to be after the recent change, but still, Wolves in scrims over the last few days have been frying everyone they've played, and it's actually a really interesting story, because Sentinels played them in the first round, and look, Sen are going to be the heavy favourites, no doubt about it, but, you know, if there's one maybe surprise team from the Chinese region that can do some serious damage, you might well have a look heavily at that Wolves team, given the way that they've done over the last few days, at least in practice. Now, that is, you know, look, we're talking about practice at the end of the day, but it is still relevant. So, these are the games. They come up in a week's time. There is lots of talk actually about the scheduling here because the games are relatively early in the Americas, right? Because it's East Coast time in Toronto. Now, they want it to be viewable around the world, which is understandable. There's always a debate on this. Do you make the timings better for the local fans or for the international audience? Now, for the initial stages, I think it's fine to make it work internationally, right? Because it's not going to be, they're not in the huge arenas quite yet, so having it at an appropriate time for the fans likely maybe isn't so relevant. But it is an argument to say that, look, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when people are at work, you've got games at 10 and 11, 10 a.m., 1 p.m., when people can't really watch. But also, if you host it after work, then none of the rest of the world can really watch. So that's the debate, really. But anyway, these are the games that are upcoming. This is the first round stage, the Swiss stage. Heretics play Paper X, Billy play Team Liquid, Sentinels play Wolves, and then Gen.G MIBR is the first round game. So on paper, right, Sen will be really happy with their draw, but based on what we've seen over the last few days, it might not be quite so clear cut as that. So very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.